Okay, we will continue anyway and keep on time. So, good morning. My name is Claire Gubbins. I'm a professor in DCU in HR and Organisation Behaviour. And I'm delighted on behalf of the Early Career Development Network arm of the Irish Academy of Management to welcome you to this morning's spring event. So we are delighted to welcome Professor Felicity Kelleher, who will speak to us shortly on the joy of giving, what I know and dislike about the academic service label. I'm very much looking forward to it. When we're speaking to Felicity, I was wishing she had told me all of her nuggets way back in my own academic career. So the lineup for this morning is this. Professor Anne Keegan, UCD, who is on the Early Career Development Network Committee, is going to start us off with giving us a bit of a clue as to what academic service is across all of our respective institutions, because no two are the same, which makes it fun. And then Donal is going to kick off to introduce us to Professor Felicity. And then we have our keynote speaker. We will then conclude with a kind of a discussion, because we'd like to hear from all of your guys. The key objectives of the Early Career Development Network is for the committee and those that we work with to be able to help you. But equally for you to get your voice heard about, what you're taking away from these events, what else you would like to do, what's working for you, what you need to know more about. So because of the nature of Felicity's talk this morning and the whole topic of this event on academic service, we would love to get insights on your perspective as early career academics, early career researchers, PhDs. It's a very, very important area that doesn't get enough traction, enough coverage when you're at the stage that you guys are at. And so I hope today's event will be useful to you. So I will hand over now to Professor Anne Keegan, and if that's okay with you.
Everyone see that okay?
Yes, you're on the key takeaway slide, and that's all.
Yeah, exactly. I need to be at the beginning. Sorry. Everyone look away. I'm watching. Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. And I want to thank Claire for inviting me to do a brief talk this morning about what does academic service mean. So, okay, maybe you have a similar experience to me, but I think we could all agree that most people in most jobs, say our contemporaries who we went to college with who didn't go into academia, all of their jobs have some sort of, servicey contribution type of activities, but they seem outside of academia to be a little more vague or a little more varied, a little bit less varied, for example. Whereas in academia, the idea of service and contribution, not everywhere, say not every university equally, maybe the technical universities could be different from the more established universities. Maybe it's a little bit different in one context to another, but compared to industry, for example, or companies, I think the idea of services is more defined. And one of the other things about this is it's more varied. Today, obviously, we're going to be talking about the academic service part of our FASTIR framework. And some of you who've been to previous ECDN events, either the spring events or maybe the event at the annual conference, will have seen me showing this diagram before. And this was pulled together in 2021 by a colleague. I've given credit for it here. It was on Twitter at the time. She pulled together sort of all the different things. She was quite frustrated, I think, and she just wanted to show, look at everything we do. We sometimes think our jobs are as sort of academics, early career scholars moving in, for example, to their first role, that it's really only about teaching and research, when actually, when you pull together all the different things we do under all of the different kind of labels, And then you get this huge sort of amount of activities falling under all three dimensions: teaching, research, and also service. So what I wanted to do today is acknowledge that our roles are really very varied, and it can be quite tricky. Certainly I found it quite difficult in the beginning to sort of wrap my head and my role around all of these different expectations. We sometimes, I think, see the big tensions are between teaching and research. You know, how much time do we have for these? When we're early career scholars, what should we really focus on? I certainly, maybe you did too, got loads of advice about things I should say no to, things I should always reserve time for. And that's great. I think that advice is great, but it can also be quite difficult to implement when you're in a new role, when you go into a new context, you've just started in a new department, and it's not very evident what exactly you should be focusing on, because when the asks come, they can feel quite imposing at times. And so what I have found interesting about delving into this is just to acknowledge the variety, just to acknowledge maybe the high expectations on academics to be doing lots of service and contribution. Also to acknowledge the sort of varied and kind of implicit nature of this, and to try and put a little bit more structure on, well, what does it actually mean? Now, so what I did is, with the help of my colleagues on the Early Career Development Network, I took a tour around 5 different universities. I'd like to tell you this was scientific. In my selection, it absolutely wasn't. I basically wrote to all my colleagues and said, can you send me your development frameworks? And those who have them, and what was interesting is not everyone did, or not everyone could find them easily, but certainly those that had them, they were very generous and they shared them with me. And so what I'm going to do now is take you through the different approaches of 5 universities in Ireland to the topic of academic service. So what is it? What does it mean? And to try to bring some clarity to all of you, especially early career scholars who might be entering or thinking about entering university for the first time since their PhD, maybe since their postdoc, and what might it look like? And I want you to think about this as sort of openly and creatively as you can, because what I will share with you suggests a number of different things, including that there is some choice here. Maybe the choice is not to do service or not, but maybe whether to do some types of service or not. And rather than having requests and asks coming in and just being overwhelmed and saying yes to everything in the beginning, to be thinking about this in a slightly broader way. If we look at patterns across Irish universities, then we see that academic service actually means different things to different universities. Some themes are very common, and I will highlight those. So there are some sort of types of service which are pretty universal, which you can expect as an early career academic maybe to meet or be confronted with. But most universities also offer different ways of expressing academic service. And I think this is where the sort of autonomy can come in, or maybe the preparedness can come in for you to think about that. Universities differ also in how academic service is explicated or expressed and evaluated. Now, what do I mean by this? I would imagine that service contributions are expected everywhere, but there is a difference in the way universities explicate this and what they say is valuable to them. And so I'll try to look at some of those examples if we look across these 5 different universities. Also, a very big caveat here. The frameworks I'm going to show you can and do change. So don't rely on the fact that sort of in a year and a half, if you're going out, what you see here today still stands. I would advise everybody, obviously, if you're thinking of applying somewhere or if you're going for promotion somewhere, and that's an interesting one because I've learned an awful lot just by looking at the frameworks here in UCD, you know, things I before I started looking at these frameworks may not have been familiar with about how UCD expresses service and has expectations. But just a big caveat is that these things change, and you really do need to go in, you know, strategies change, and often development and frameworks change. And that's mainly what I'm going to be showing you, is what are called variously in different institutions, promotion and development type of frameworks. So let's take a look first at Limerick, and thanks to Johnny for this. This service is called Administrative and Community Service, and it roughly breaks down into service within the university and outside of the university. And so you can see, for example, that if you are going in as an early career scholar, you might be asked to contribute to things like being a module coordinator. You might take on the role of academic director. And there's also a kind of inside-outside thing here, in the sense that service within the university also asks colleagues to think about helping students to maybe make links outside the university. So maybe internships, placements. And we know that these are all considerable bodies of work. Anyone who's involved in trying to manage an internship program or get placements or get research data for their students will know this. There's also service outside the university, so service to external networks, to professional communities. If you're on a government body, if you're advising or working with a trade union on a particular matter, these things would all count as service. So you can see that the university asks colleagues, academics, to take part in all of the things which kind of make a university work, and which are difficult and timely at times, but can also be very rewarding. And so finding your way in this. Moving on to DCU. DCU have a quite detailed, and this is not uncommon, quite detailed framework on service. And if you see the main heading is service and contribution to university and society, which is broken down broadly into 3 dimensions. And here again, some of the nuances come across of what service is articulated like in DCU. So we're going to look at the satisfactory achievement column. And it's quite common across universities that the service and contribution or academic service pillar of an hiring or a promotion or development framework differentiates between colleagues at different levels of the organization. So satisfactory achievement, and this is similar in UCD, would be colleagues who are joining the university maybe in their first academic role as a lecturer or an assistant professor. And so if we look down that column, we can see that you know, if you're an early career scholar thinking, okay, what would be the expectations from me? It wouldn't necessarily be those things highlighted in blue, which would be the kinds of expectations you might have for people who are more senior in their career. So if we look for a moment at the dimensions, we can see very, very commonly, just like with Limerick, you know, contributing to your school, contributing to committees in your school, contributing to the activities within your school, which are often about not only teaching, but also research. They can also be about other more specialized aspects, for example, like inclusion, where you might be involved in Athena Swan. So these are the kind of high-level dimensions contributing effectively to the university in terms of leadership and responsibility. So the kind of roles you might step into early in your career. And also there's a second dimension, which is capacity development. How are you developing other people? How are you developing the university's values in general? And there is a third dimension, which is about a broader societal contribution, whether you're representing social economic input or enterprise awareness. So I think this dimension is a really good example of how, in order to understand and contextualize service, you also need to know about the university, because universities have different profiles, they have different ways that they express their priorities. And we know that DCU is outstanding on enterprise awareness and on connections to to stakeholders in industry and small and medium-sized companies. So it's unsurprising to me that there is a clear dimension for this. If those are the kind of broad dimensions, it's also important, I think, certainly to calm everyone down, including myself, that you're not expected to tick every single one of these boxes. Okay, so I pulled out underneath examples of what would be early career indicators of service. So it isn't that you're expected to do everything there in that column. So you might be thinking, okay, which of these dimensions appeals to me the most? Trying to put that together in the puzzle with what is the university, what is my department head asking of me, or what is the dean suggesting that I do. And so down in the dimensions, indicators of dimension 1 would be, like I said, a very common one. You're active member of school boards. Dimension 2, you could be a member of the Athena Swan Committee or one of its subcommittees. And in dimension 3, you might participate in outreach, and that could be outreach of different kinds. Social outreach I know DCU has an exceptional record of outreach within the local community, with helping students who are in TY 5th and 6th year with tutoring and mentoring to encourage widening participation. But there are other types of participation and outreach. It might be a more socioeconomic focus, or it might be a focus more on enterprise. Galway have a different way of articulating service, which they call competencies. So they have a competency framework, and competency 5 is collegiate and community contribution. So this I found very helpful, because the document also gives advice to university department heads and so on, but how would you identify this? What is the competency? What might be the indicators? So, for example, quite common kind of competency in service and contribution, like I said, is being on university boards. Then there are also quite kind of, I thought, very nice ones, which maybe indicate a priority in Galway. Possesses the negotiation skills to achieve a balance between university academic requirements and the competing requirements of external bodies, right? Now, we'll all translate that in our own way in our roles. I translate this into dealing with accrediting bodies. You know, there's quite a lot of skill required when you're designing a program, you're running a department, or you're an academic director of a program, with negotiating and making sure that what an accrediting body is looking for is aligned with your standards, your learning outcomes for your program. So I thought that was a very nice example of how kind of academic service and contribution is translated in a particular context, and how you could see your role in a kind of richer way. And maybe also, what would you be interested in? If you're somebody who really likes negotiating with external parties, or likes to bring different things together, that might be helpful. If we jump over to UCC, this again was a tremendously interesting kind of example of how service is articulated, and thanks to James for this one. So in the first instance, this is an example of the kind of requirements for academic citizenship and engagement, which would be in step 1 of a promotion process, sort of the table stakes. So to sort of navigate step 1, you would want to be shown a record of participation in your school's administrative systems, and maybe how you contribute positively to your school or your college. You might want to be showing evidence of tangible outputs of that contribution. You know, so maybe you contribute by being an academic director and navigating an accrediting process. So you're being asked to show not only what you do. That's the difference between being on a committee, sitting there, going out of the room, and maybe saying, well, okay, as part of that committee, these are the kinds of things I achieved. And then representation on developing connections and partnerships with the external environment. Then once colleagues have passed through the step 1 of the promotion system, it becomes more detailed at step 2. Now, don't forget, I'm only dealing with service here. These people going for promotion are also dealing with teaching and research, and they have corollary demands to show that. But I thought I would take the example of public output, because again, you need to drill down. There are lots of indicators of public output. For example, you contributed to influencing education or public engagement, you involved in volunteering, learning exchange, or you're involved in co-creation knowledge with the community. So what's important here is, again, don't be overwhelmed by the global of this. Try to find what is kind of down in the indicators, which suggest maybe a match with you, with your values, with your interests, and so on. I'll finish the examples with UCD. UCD has also this sort of tripartite structure of a development framework for research, teaching, and leadership and contribution. In terms of leadership and contribution, again, the classic one, contributing actively to being a member of school committees and boards. These can be program boards, these could be teaching and learning committees, and so on. And again, we're at the satisfactory level as an early career scholar when you're entering the university for the first time. But UCD also uses this framework to advance its strategy. So in the strategy Rising to the Stars, we had a very big emphasis on building community, and that manifests in indicators around fostering inclusion, so extracurricular activities in support of students and the wider community, or participation in conferring ceremonies and other major external events. So again, go down into the indicators because they help you to sort of put some meat on the bones of this. Takeaways, which I showed you at the beginning, was not a mistake with the technology, it was a pedagogical technique of mine. Look at how service is articulated in general. You know, what is the broad approach? What is the focus of the university where you want to work with? Craft your service approach. Some of us are much more interested in kind of being involved in the internal dynamics of the university. Others are more interested in external partnerships, community building, widening participation. I know I say this sort of until I'm blue in the face on every single one of these meetings, but I think one of the things which would have helped me a lot throughout my career was to be more meticulous in keeping a record of all of the different things I did. Because, you know, when we're coming up for, you know, applying for a job, or when we're coming up for a promotion process, it's overwhelming to pull all of the information together. If I showed you, for example, UCD's promotion and development framework, and the applications can run to, you know, job applications can run to 5 to 10 pages, and you're asked to, you know, show evidence of contribution, evidence how you did this, evidence how you did that. It's the same, even more intense, I think, with promotion processes, where you really have to, you know, develop a narrative around your service and contribution. And it's very easy to forget. And one of the difficulties, I think, is not all of the things we do or want to do are things we do because we want to tick boxes, or we want to show evidence, or we want to count things, or we want to put metrics. We do a lot of things because we love them, we're interested in them, we're passionate. I'm very passionate about widening participation, try to do as much as I can on that, but I wouldn't have been very focused on how do I make that visible. So I think a very easy thing to do here is just keep an Excel spreadsheet or something, and when you go and give a guest lecture in a secondary school to fifth years to talk about coming to your university, maybe just jot it down, because it helps you to tell your narrative when it comes to things like applying for jobs or promotion. And that was it for me. Thank you to my colleagues for sharing the information. I understand also that not every institution does this the same way, and I'm hoping that we hear lots this morning. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I'm going to follow on now by introducing our main speaker. Thank you, Anne, so much for us all to take on board, and a great start this morning. On behalf of the Early Career Network of the Irish Academy of Management, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Felicity Kelleher as our main speaker this morning. Felicity is Professor of Management Practice and Academic Lead of the Brim Recon Research Centre at the Faculty of Business, South East Technological University, Ireland, where she lectures in management practice, leadership, change, and innovation. An experienced principal investigator, research supervisor, and mentor, Felicity specializes in action research and longitudinal interpretive case methods, studying management capability development in micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, with a particular interest in rural business. A Fulbright alum, Felicity has engaged with over 1,200 SMEs in service innovation, capability development, and learning initiatives, and was awarded the Knowledge Transfer Ireland Research to Business Collaborative Impact Award in 2015 in recognition of this work. She works closely with colleagues in Ireland, Europe, and North America on a number of funded research projects and regularly contributes to management theory through publication in top-tier international journals. Felicity contributes to academic and practice communities in a variety of national and international roles and is a past chair of the Irish Academy of Management. I know I speak for a lot of us in the Academy who benefited from Felicity's wisdom and generosity in supporting early career academics. She really does live the theme of the joy of giving in academia. We really couldn't think of anyone better to guide us through this very nuanced topic of academic service. Felicity, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Donal. As always, it's weird to hear yourself. So and some of that and none of that is how we see ourselves. So it's a pleasure to meet everyone. And this morning, really for the next hour or so, what we'd love is for you to go away with your thoughts on academic service through your own lens as early career researchers and early career academics, and working out for yourselves what it is you want from this career and what you want from each other, because we are a community. And if I could speak to the Irish Academy of Management, it's just such a pleasure to be invited into such a warm and giving community of academics as is in the Academy of Management. What a fantastic facility that was provided through the insight and vision of others initially when it was set up by Paddy Gonigal and Bill Roach and many others in the context of thinking about what they could do for us when we were early career. So it's very much about a pay it forward community. And that is in itself a joy in giving. So if I could, Claire, if you could give me a sharing facility, and also if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Brilliant. So what do I know? Very little, truth be known. I always smile at, the idea of two things. If you gain confidence, you'll fall over in the next 2 minutes. And if you think you're humble, sure, you've lost it by just bringing it to the surface. But what I do know for myself is that I have, I'll just share my own screen here. Just give me 1 sec. Great. So for me, what I do know, hopefully you can see that. These are the things that are, for me, the important pieces of my world. So much like Anne has said, suppose I came into this late. I'm a hybrid, so I came from industry and I had worked out what was eroding my soul in industry. So one of the things that really bothered me and what I was doing in more senior roles in industry was when I touched my integrity or my moral compass. And I was being asked to tell less truths about whether a product was ready for sale. And I knew that that was hitting my integrity. And when your soul is out on APRO like that, you work out fairly quickly what's important to you. So for yourselves, I'm asking you for the next hour or so, what's important to you? And when is something valuable to your values? And when is something wrong for your values? Because it'll be much easier to decide what's right for you in terms of service, if you know what pieces of service feel right to you, feel like you're giving something back, that you're enjoying what you're giving back, that you're seeing the fruits of your labor in a way that's hitting your own value system. And I agree with you. I mean, one of the big things that I feel is important for us right now is advocacy, because the voice of people in minorities and the voice of people in situations that are less privileged and less accessible than ours is lowering in the way the globe is going at the moment. So one of the most important pieces for me in terms of my academic service is that I'm raising my voice of advocacy year on year. And I'm calling people out where I wouldn't have when I was, you know, a younger woman. That if I see or hear a comment that I know in my heart and soul is undermining the individual it's passed at or about and is eroding their capacity to be an equal member of the academy, I'm accepting that a piece of my role now is to call them out. You know, in as nice a way as possible. You know, easier attract bees with honey than vinegar. So there's no point wagging the finger, but there is a capacity within to just call people out in terms of service. So that's what matters to me. My integrity matters to me. A wiser woman than me once told me that your integrity can only be given up by you, but it can be only given up by you once. You lost it. If you do it once, that's it. You're done. So it's about protecting my integrity through that value lens that's important to me. What's really important to me is industry and society and academia as being partners. So two pieces of a puzzle. As you can see here, I like this image because it says to me what I think we are. We're not showing them, we're not bestowing our wisdom on industry or society as academics in business and management. We're working alongside our fellow travelers in those contexts in the hopes of collectively improving our lot as a wider community. Which brings me to the bottom left. Any of you that know me knows that I keep using this phrase, it takes a village. And what I mean by that is nobody can lift a piano on their own. So this idea that we're individualistic and that we can write down, I led this and I led that and I achieved this and I achieved that. There's an awful lot of I-ing in academia. And in truth, you know, give and take is really important. And I can see so many people on this call that I text going, come here, do you ever have a piece of, or do you ever have an Anne's picture? So I'm already taking it down going, God, that's fantastic. Because of course I'm in an emerging technological university. We're only founded in May of 2022. And we don't have as an advanced view on service as articulated as is in the universities, as Anne has covered. However, we are using DORA as our baseline for any applications in internal or external funding. So for those of you on the call that are in technological universities, you can have a look at that, which looks at development of individual and collaboration, and support for society, economy, and research community. So those are the rough areas that would fall under academic service in those who are in the TU community. And the last one is I have a fairly strong view of paying it forward because people paid it forward to me and they reached out to me when they didn't have to and they supported me when they didn't need to. And, you know, I think that taught me a right way of doing things in this community. So that's roughly what I know. I've a feel for who's influencing me, and I'm fairly sure that in our current situation, it's more and more important that I see who's influencing others as an academic to remain inclusive. because I could end up in a silo with the way that traditional media is only one aspect of global, international, and national communication anymore. So because of that, just make sure we can move on. I don't know if any of you know this picture, but there's an inscription on the Delphi in Athens, which roughly translates as "Know thyself." So I think in academic service, more than any other service or any other aspect of this occupation, knowing myself is really important to knowing what gives me joy and what doesn't. You know, I really avoid the dementors, you know, those people who suck the lifeblood out of you. So in context, when I'm looking to know myself, I'm looking at all the dimensions of that. So if I could ask you, who do you think is influencing your views and project perspectives on academic service, considering all that you've heard thus far? So I'm just going to share with you a link to Miro. And then I'm going to share this screen so that you can see, you can add your own perspectives. Claire, I see my camera has paused on me, has it?
It has, Felicity. We can hear you perfectly. We can see your slides perfectly, but your
Great.
visual has gone.
Yeah, that's fine. So much more important than seeing me is seeing the slides. So we will look to this. So hopefully you can see this. Now,
Yeah.
if you log on, you should be able to add here to this. So I'm saying to you, you as an individual, who's influencing you? Your inner circle of influence are those that you meet on a daily basis, whether personally or professionally. And those individuals are people that are really sparking into your ear. Any of you who know Lord of the Rings, this is snake tongue. This is the space where they're whispering in your ear so regularly as to give you a sense of insight and context. That outer circle of influence are those that maybe you don't see or hear or are with on a regular basis, but you have capacity to reach out to them. They are maybe individuals that are writers or academics that are influencing your thinking process and the evolution of your own thoughts. Those of you who are research students at the moment, who are PhD and doctoral candidates, those would be maybe some of the people you've heard and seen at conference. In early career, these may be your mentors. You're in a two-way street still, but these individuals are maybe less accessible than your inner circle. That outer circle again is that context of, you're welcome to add any details to this as you see fit. So hopefully you've been able to log on to Miro. But that outer circle here are those who influence you, but you've no capacity to influence. So who is it of the influencers? Maybe there's a particular TikTok or YouTube or podcast that's really catching your ear or eye. Or maybe it's that you're incensed by Talk to Joe or equivalent in context. So what is it that's influencing you on that outer circle? Lastly, who are your future influencers? You know, who are the people that are showing up on your radar now that are giving you that capacity to, you know, in context, if you just go to here, you can add any comments you like. So you'll see a little sticky note there. Those future influence, they are those individuals who potentially are on our horizon. This is really quite important. So at the Grammys this year, 2 of the nominees started out in TikTok and have managed to start to coordinate their capacity to challenge the music industry in its traditional construction. And like it or loathe it, the likes of the Kardashians and the younger Jenner sisters, is that they just played outside of the ordinary fields of influence in terms of this context. Good. So those in management roles being in your inner circle of influence is an important aspect of what Anne was talking about. Those in early career are thinking about where they sit in the very many requests for your time and effort in your initial roles in academia. I know there are some postdoctoral researchers on the line, and in a way, your role is even more pressured in these influence circles because we're asking you for different things. Would you be able to tell us what would be good for a particular role like yours in the future if you are new to the postdoctoral community? So you are advocating for your other postdoctoral researchers today and in the future if you're in that role. So you're already starting to see what service gives you value. Those in other institutions, or if you've met people at conference, those that you're reading that are important to you. Any of you like academic? Any of you in the capacity of academic groupies that you know who's who? This is something for yourselves. So you will take this away and just start to build it out over the next, ideally over the next couple of weeks, for you to get a visual of, okay, I can see where I feel pressure in your inner circle, like what Anne has described, and maybe how to articulate strategically what academic service activities you want as a trajectory, much like Anne has covered earlier. So that idea of picking a few of the themes and choosing your focus allows you to build building blocks into a service contribution that can be articulated if you were going for a role or going for promotion that looks connected, that looks like, okay, this individual is an advocate, or good, this individual has a particular capacity for organization. They're showing internally that they can organize events associated with student development. They're showing externally that they can organize things like conferences or contribute to things like conferences. They're showing a community ethos externally that is affiliate to something like the Irish Academy of Management. So there, when you get this dictate that you need to write this in 2 paragraphs, under Dora, for example, you've capacity to tell a story that fits your values. And this idea of who's influencing me will give you a sense of, actually, I'm okay that they are also people that meet my compass, they meet my value system. Okay. Have you any questions on that? I'm just going to take 1 minute to plug out and plug in the camera. Just give me 1 sec.
Felicity, while you're plugging out in cameras there, I think that that whole conversation that you're initiating there about who influences you is very important. I know myself and the Early Career Development Network, when you were talking about this event, that was one of the things that really resonated. Just how much somebody can influence you in your early career as an academic, as a researcher, and the influence it will have on where you put your focus. And then, of course, the consequences down the track as to whether that was the right form of influence. And as somebody who does social network research and helping people develop analyze their social network, one of the things that stands out for me is that I certainly shouldn't have back then, only listen to one or two voices as guiding and influencing what I did. Your network, your network to help you develop, and your network of influence. If you spread it broader, you get multiple perspectives, and then you can make an informed decision.
Yeah, definitely. Apologies, guys. I should say one of the great things that influences me in general in the last 6 months in particular is technology biting you in the tail end. So while the camera doesn't work, I'm still chatting to you. So in context that this is an aspect of the joys of what we live in today. And it's been an interesting journey in that context, considering we're just about at the 5-year mark of the start of COVID, and how much technology has become embedded in our systems. So just one last point in terms of influence is the vast amount of integration of technology into our influence circles. It means that when I say to you, it takes a village, we're both global and local village now. And in a sense, the influences are positive and negative in that context, because if you've too many influencing you, as Claire says, too little is one corner, but too many is like trying to take a drink from a hose. So you really are looking for that sweet spot between. And what can guide us in that context is our value system. Because I believe academic service, much more than the other aspects of the academic role, hits on our values and moral compass. So if I could share again the thinking behind this value system, I'll be honest and say this hit my radar on Monday. It won't have hit other people's radar in the same way, but I have a couple of concerns around service as a contributor to this community, Ireland. So as an academic, I do think we've to question what's going on here. So an aspect of our academic service is again going back to voicing and challenging something like this, where an individual who's a private individual, unelected, was presented as if they were representing our country on a day that is conceived of internationally, our country day. So that for me hit my core values. It hit my moral compass. So I'm asking you in the context of academic service to work out what your values are so that you can be clear what pieces of academic service you're going to pursue in the short, medium and long term. So these are kind of what my view is. I've never cared what color, creed, religion, background, whatever you come from. I've always cared what you do. So if I see you mistreat another individual who you perceive to be in a lower ranked role than you professionally, I guarantee you I'll back away from an individual like that, because that hits my value system. Because regardless, prince or pauper, we all have a place at the table. And regardless of our roles in our academic environment, we all have a job to do. So that central piece is most important to me, that we're global academics, that we're seeing ourselves as service to the academy on various levels. I have a general core value that I don't think we should grow up fully. If we do, it'll be expected of us. And I've fed that into my nieces and nephews and now into my great nephews. That what I mean by that is staying curious means we're less likely to be judgmental, as once said by Einstein. I've a real interest and curiosity in what you're doing. So for me, academic service, I'm getting as much as I'm giving. And that's what the joy is, because the day that you say to someone, how are you getting on with your research? You're hearing about their research in a way that's collegial. And that's giving me a sense of, oh, that's fantastic, what's going on. So this morning I've already learned more than I've given, because the Susan Wardle's exhibit that Anne presented, that's brilliant. I must take a screenshot of that, because that's a capture for me. And would I be adding anything in, or would I be taking anything out? But I definitely would take that circle and take a highlighter pen to it. As an early career researcher, I'd have loved that, because I'd have taken a highlighter pen and said, these are 3 things in each of those thirds that are in that circle. These are the 3 things I'm going to focus on for my professional development for my 2 to 5 year plan. So I thought that was super in terms of that curiosity, keeping us looking outward and kind of dulling down the capacity we all have as humans to be judgmental. Something that's becoming more and more important to my core values is sustainability. Now, I always thought our parents were better than us at sustainability. I think that it's really interesting. The plastic was originally introduced into the world as a sustainable product. It was never intended to be thrown away. It was intended for pre-use or reuse. And if we look at what our parents did, they reused and recycled everything. Anyone who's over the age of 40 was sent to school with, packaging that was redone. I just have a clear memory, even when cling film was introduced, of bits of cling film stuck with magnets to various fridges and various surfaces around the house, because here, use that bit now to wrap up the sandwich that you're bringing today. All of us in Kerry, anyhow, we all had flasks where we brought our soup. So in context, when I look to sustainability, I'm now looking rudimentarily at my own consumption, but also at the college consumption. If we're doing something, I'm saying, guys, could we not pull back on that? Could we not pull back on the use of plastic and the use of paper, et cetera, et cetera? And as I've mentioned already, my core in terms of equality, and when I say equality, I mean all equality. So EDI is not about me being female. EDI is about me wanting to see inclusivity in my environment that can be improved. And what can I do as an academic in my service to say, do you realize, sometimes do I realize maybe I have a bias towards X, Y, or Z? And maybe then, that inner circle of influence is a two-way street. Maybe spotting now and again when the management team is doing something that you maybe is going, oh gosh, maybe there's a better way of doing that to be more inclusive. Again and again and again, I'm going, oh gosh, we're awful white on the boards of things and that. So is there things we can do to negotiate in terms of academic service in this corner? Okay, so I'm just going to stop here and ask you the question of, let's reopen. Just give me 1 second, move this over. It's the joy of preparing things earlier. You leave them in the oven too long and they get moved. There we go.
You're giving me flashbacks to lockdown, Felicity.
Very good. And I'll share now.
I'm just delighted that you're talking about things like dementors now, Felicity. So my reading of Harry Potter to my kids, I can relate to my work life now and see the people who are sucking the life out of me in work.
Isn't it true though? Because
Yes.
you know, you got to work out who's who.
Yes, I'll be able to use that now in my work life.
Great. I'm having difficulty here with this, so just give me 1 second and we'll just delete these. And that. Okay, so again, I want you to, now you don't necessarily have to fill it in here, but if we can just think about what do we mean by academic service? So considering all you've seen this morning, what community contributions are you thinking of for that professional development plan that you're developing for yourself over the next 2 years? And be realistic about you can't be all things to all people. And you'll be asked quite a bit to do a certain amount of stuff that may not fit in your image of what direction you want to go in. So by doing this, you're treating community contribution and service, community service, in a strategic way. That doesn't mean you're less of a contributor. It means you're sure that you aren't unintentionally or unwittingly ending up in a space where you're so disparate in what you're trying to achieve that you start to feel overwhelmed and that it's too much to try and reach for anything. So the best advice I can give you through bitterest experience, as Tao would say, is don't do what I did, which is I said yes to an awful lot of stuff in my first 2 or 3 years because I didn't fully understand what was academic service coming from industry. So it's now that I realize it would have been helpful if I had, it would have been helpful for me as an individual if I had contemplated what were the core things I wanted to contribute. And then to look at my picture of what are the community contributions I want to make and what are the internal contributions I want to make over a kind of a 2-year period. That would have been helpful to me to say no to certain things. So saying no to everything is neither possible, nor actually is it the right thing to do because it's a third of that circle and presented is academic service. However, saying no to yet another thing in the same area is a good idea. So if you are all course leadership, it's one line on your CV. Okay. If you are all conference organization, it's all in one space externally. So you're balancing what's right. And to be honest, the boards I am on now, I usually say one regional, one national board at any one time so that I can be legitimate in my values by ensuring that I read all the documentation for that board. Sometimes I'm on international boards and sometimes I amn't. But that's because I'm in a technological university who has a regional development remit. You might be different if you're in a traditional or an established university, and the remit, as Anne has presented in those 5 universities, may be a different contribution. So DCU has a commitment to industry that it comes from its origins in the Nahi days. You know, Trinity and UCD have a commitment to knowledge contribution on an international level, that are in specific discipline areas where you're contributing at a global level in certain things. So you're looking to your mentor, your influencer, to guide you in what is enough in this space. I'm going to stop speaking now for about 10 minutes, and I just want to give the individuals in this room the opportunity to fill this in through what you've heard today. So you're walking away with something tangible to action as you're developing your action plans. So it's now about 10:30. So if we take about 10 minutes to legitimately look at this, and then we'll move on. Of course, if there's any questions, I'm just here. Okay, managed to fix the camera. I think what's important here is that you can see the variety of things that are being highlighted in the context of contributing to the organization events in the university, being a postgraduate research representative, joining relevant academic or professional associations, joining the editorial board of a university journal or of a journal in general, teaching, mentoring, and supervising students. That's an interesting one because that really does fit under teaching and learning. So in context, if you were giving advice to those individuals, it would sit in academic service, reviewing papers, participating in regional associations, supporting academic colleagues and volunteering, contributing to internationalization strategy by coaching students who are interested in study abroad programs. Very good. Helping out the institutional accreditations and program evaluations, board membership, targeted support for underserved groups, access paths. That is your network, is your net worth in the context of that, because some of what we do in terms of academic service is understanding what our colleagues are doing in student services, in lifelong learning, in specialist services, if you have individuals who need certain supports, and in pastoral care, you'll have pastoral care systems. So a part of your academic service is building your knowledge of what each of these functions is doing in your organization so that you have a greater opportunity to to hand in a baton way to the appropriate individual. So I honestly believe an aspect of my academic service is knowing my limitations. I'm not a psychologist. I do not have capacity to appropriately help an individual who perhaps is coping with trauma, for example. So it may feel like service, but that's counterproductive for that individual. It might feel to me like I'm too great, you know, I'm such a giving person. But giving in the right way is an aspect of academic service, and understanding where the boundaries are of our role as academics in academic service, and showing respect for our colleagues who are specialists in those other roles is an aspect of knowing each other. So I think a piece of my academic service is to show respect for my colleagues who are specialists in all those areas, and to know when it's appropriate to baton, to hand someone over. And I mean it, baton. If someone's struggling in that context, our value system should be that we bring that individual to another. We don't leave a void between us as the academic in our service role and the right person for that individual and in pastoral care. And I thought it was really interesting in your diagram that it says student pastoral care, but sometimes it's peer pastoral care, you know, that realizing that a colleague actually isn't just swamped, but is no longer coping. There's a wisdom in walking alongside them and helping them to find the appropriate help for themselves. And that's true of you as well in early career and as students. If you do spot someone is beyond not coping, you know, or isn't coping, then an aspect of your academic service is to just reach out and touch that stone. You know, so it can be as simple as that, but not to bring it to a place where you think you know better than the specialists in the area. So it's really quite a balancing act in some of what has been commented at up here in terms of outreach. Yeah, the data schools are brilliant, aren't they? We get them in for events that that we have each year, and it's just super to see them, and super to see environments where we're promoting the inclusion of individuals who might be the first ever to attend a college in their family. So when we talk about inclusion, we mean all inclusion in context. I mean, certainly SETU is across the road from a community that rarely go to college. So, you know, we could just cross the road. We don't even have to get on a bus to think about inclusion in a wider way. Okay. Once you've worked out all the things you could do, I would do two things in hindsight, because hindsight's perfect vision. I'd have worked out realistically, so take those rose tinted glasses, that'll only take a minute, a real Irish phrase. I'll be there in 5 minutes, could be anything from now to any time in the future. So being realistic about how long something takes. So participation in a conference team is probably going to take 2 weeks of your time as a participant. So you put that in as a one thing for maybe over the 2 years, because that's a biggie. If you're going to be so that's as a member, if you're going to be chair of that, you're probably looking at 6 weeks realistically. By the time you've coordinated everything, something like the IM, and you're making sure 3 things. You're making sure you're putting a team around you. As an academic service, these are a team of volunteers. So you're putting a team around you, that you're being pragmatic about A, that you need all that team for delegation, and B, that you're including the guys that are just behind you in giving them an opportunity to put something on their CV. So including all of the postdocs in some capacity, if you're hosting a conference, is a good way of being inclusive. You know, offering that opportunity to all. So on a third, really, I put being realistic. You're researchers, many of you. So you need research to have a decent amount of time, let's say a minimum of a day a week that's dedicated in that context. Otherwise, you won't make progress in early career. And if you are looking to promotion or to tenure, you will need that slice. So cut that out and make sure you protect that time. And then you're looking at your function in teaching and learning and activity in that context. You're probably looking at a day a week in academic service terms as a rough guide for you being pragmatic about including service in your development plan. And as I say, you're picking from that wonderful diagram and that wonderful conversation Anne had with you. You're picking in context what pieces of this is a trajectory into that value. What's your value system? So there are loads of things I'm asked to do that might be commercially viable, but I'm not going to do that for 2 reasons. I'm not going to do it because it's infringing on the small businesses that do that. But what I can do is introduce you to the small business owner that does that. But that's just me. That's That's my decision. But I know that's categoric. I also know categorically if I'm asked to do certain things, I realize that that's it then. I have to take every other service activity I have off the table. So I have learned that no is a full sentence. So I've worked it out only in recent past that doesn't fit my personal and professional development plan. So if you walk away with nothing today, I'm encouraging you to think about a professional development plan that includes your community service, academic service in a way that is thoughtful and fits your value system. In that, I'm encouraging you to think about the balance between internal and external service. So I mentioned I'm on boards. So in Waterford, I'm on the Waterford Integration Services Board because I mentioned that advocacy is something that's important to me. And when I was asked onto that board, I felt that that was important. So from an academic service perspective, that might be less prestigious than the other boards that are in my community regionally. But from my point of view, it's an opportunity for me to try and comprehend, to walk in the shoes of a new entrant in Ireland and understand, at least on a surface level, some of the challenges they're facing. So that was my choice, my value system. On a national level, I'm on the Department of Rural and Community Development Futures Committee, Academic Committee. So there, I'll be really honest, that's a give and take one, because I want to influence their policy to make sure that they don't forget micro enterprise. So I'm not a bit, there's no halo here. I'm mostly avoiding the horns because I'm not a bit altruistic in that role. I'm trying to bang on their door and trying to convince them that the road goes both ways because they're inside in Dublin and they have rural in their title. So you're saying, come on onto that train. So you're spending your time advocating for your community in a way that kind of gets the voice up for rural communities. So that's that level. And then internationally, at the moment, I'm on an advisory council for EDI and responsible research in Europe, a European view of that. So those give you a feel for, those three are fairly attached to each other in that kind of advocacy voice. So you think about what you want to be. You don't have to, don't be a different version of yourself. Wearing a mask is going to be far more detrimental for you in this profession than you realize. If you start putting on a mask and saying, I'm this person for this group and I'm this person, you won't remember. You won't remember which version of yourself you're supposed to be. And you'll arrive in as Felicity version 1 into group version 3. And then there's no authenticity. So just work it out for yourself in terms of your own capacity. What is the vein of value in the various contributions you intend to make, but to think about the balance of those two in a pragmatic way as well under DORA, which is what am I doing to develop individuals and collaboration? Because that's one section of DORA in the context of that. And what am I doing to support society, economy, and the research community? So those two are important in the context of the values. So lastly, you'll be glad to hear, this is the last of it. My head good. Making sure I'm keeping to the time, otherwise Claire would be giving me an awful hard time altogether.
You're doing great, Felicity, and sad to hear it's the last slide.
So in context, what do I like about academic service? Lads, I like camaraderie. I like working with people. You know, as soon as we hopped on 5 years ago onto screens, a good number of the people that I can see today all hopped onto a screen together and said, what do we do at the conference? the year that COVID hit. So I like that camaraderie. And for me, I like the sense of giving. And it's not altruistic. There is a joy in giving that I really enjoy. The watching somebody else succeed and that you've put a pebble in the water and seeing them grow, whether that is an individual that you can see is shy and helping them to work out how to articulate in a way in a meeting that gets their voice up. Or if you spot a colleague at my stage of career and you're saying they're putting an awful lot on those willing shoulders, and you take them to one side and you say to them, don't say yes to anything else now because you've enough on your plate, but you simultaneously take their manager to one side because it's great having tenure. They have to shoot you to get rid of you. And you take that manager to one side and say, you're putting too much pressure on that individual. And it's not that they'll keep going, it's that you'll lose them altogether. So that's a weighing scales when you're getting further into your career as to what your contribution is. Sometimes it'll be invisible in terms of reaching out to say, that's not fair. And on the dislike side, it's a hidden contribution unless you're strategic about it, and it can be huge. It can be limitless. So academic housework can be limitless. And I want to say in context, it's a bit like housework in your house. You know, if you do it all the time and you don't delegate to somebody, unstack that dishwasher there and hoover that floor, then you're not only doing it all the time, but it becomes invisible. I don't know if you've seen that YouTube clip where a guy has a girlfriend move in, and this isn't fair because it's gender specific. We should say that where a girl has a boyfriend move in and he does all the housework, but the girlfriend thinks that it's magic, that it's an elf that does it, because there isn't a contribution side to it. So that's the piece I dislike, and I've gotten much stricter going, come here you've your name down as being a panel member or being a committee member or being X or being Y, and you're never here and you never contribute. So you're going to do this job next. And, you know, because when you get to elder lemon status, it's fabulous. You know, wait till you get to this age, because you can actually point out to people, you don't get to put that on your CV because you're being inauthentic and your values don't match mine. So that's the piece I dislike around a sense of being used. I would walk on hot coals for people that I admire, respect, appreciate, and can see wouldn't do that. But if you manipulate an individual, a colleague, it's back to integrity. If you manipulate someone, if you use someone, if you only say hello to someone when you're looking for something, they know. They're not idiots. They know that you're using them. And you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So that piece, I think, will affect your career eventually. You know, I don't believe in karma, but I do believe I'll call you out. And the last one is paperwork. I jokingly told people throughout work, in the 2 weeks before Lent, that I was giving up emails this year for Lent. And honestly, this piece is something that is a piece of our academic services. I'm calling all of us to arms to say, we've got to push back. And when I say paperwork, I just mean this bludgeoning filling in of forms and coming to meetings where there's no agenda or no actions, because that's just a conversation. And all those pieces are the bits I dislike. So it's great having this network and having all the networks we know. We've to watch for in academic service that we're not stacking boxes that aren't strategic. So just being practical and pragmatic and saying, I'm going to do a piece of each. I'm going to be able to identify that I'm contributing to those main areas of that circle. And I'm going to find the bits that, you know, are part of my value system. Be very careful of the drowning in paperwork. You know, especially one of the things you said as community services applying for accreditation. Margaret Heffernan is there in the background, I think, and bless her, but she had a few of those, and I know that the rest of you have as well. They're big, 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 so you need to delegate in context so that you're pulling from the right team. An aspect of your role as you grow into it is to acknowledge when there is a requirement for additional resource. And another aspect is to understand where your battery is. So what level of battery is right? I was chatting to a friend of mine yesterday, and they were asking me, what did how was it getting on? I'm commuting now, I get commute an hour. And I said, I'm getting on grand. You know what I put on my phone is two things. I put a thing on at 10 o'clock at night where it stops all notifications and it only restarts at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I put a thing on that I can only use my phone 45 minutes a day for internet. And I've saved about 3 hours a day because I have a little thing that tells you weekly use of your phone. And I realized I was getting up into 2-3 hours a day, which was putting me in this space because I was fiddling with the damn thing instead of going to sleep. So these are some of the little tricks in context to kind of try and find the balance. Because otherwise, and news is in there and all the things we discussed today and health and my poor old brain and I better walk and I'm supposed to be at the gym and all that kind of thing, that these are all the pieces that I need to be doing, which is more in this role than any other, is that work, value, life balance. So working out what's best for you. Okay. I'll stop sharing. Yep, that should be it. Is back to any questions or anything, and we're going to get you to do a bit of work, I think, now.
We are indeed, Felicity. So if you can give me back my host rights, and James is going to organize some breakout rooms for us. And Felicity, I believe you have a question you want to kick us off with for the breakout
Just
room.
1 second now, and I'll pull it back up. I'll put these in the chat for you. We have 2 questions. What are you taking away from today that you know is in your wheelhouse of academic service? So what are the things you're going to take away in terms of actions that build you into your academic service plan that's part of your professional development? And now I'm just going to make sure that Claire make the host.
That's perfect.
It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Felicity. So James, if you want to send everyone off into a breakout room with that question, what are you taking away from today that you know is in your wheelhouse of academic service? And then we'll reconvene here in 5 minutes.
Available for service and trying to make sure that they were trying to make sure that you weren't pulled in so many different directions, that there was a consistency in terms of the service that you are able to provide.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Trina. That's great. Someone from room 2?
James, was I in room 2?
Yeah, that's right, Anne. Yeah, yourself, Maggie, and Peter.
Yeah, so Maggie, myself, and Peter had a great conversation. It was very nice to meet them actually and learn a bit about their PhDs and where they are. one of the insights was the relief and almost sort of most standout thing is that you can't say no. So that, you know, hearing that you can say no is very important, because there is a sense of, well, you might say no to the wrong person who could damage your career, or you might say no to the wrong person and then you would be afraid of what the consequences would be down the line. Another insight I found from the discussion, which was really interesting, was unlike other contexts, maybe industry, company life, service is really legitimate in a university setting. The idea of helping other people, and that can be very empowering. And one of the nicest things is that it's expected, it's legitimate. And so it's easier to do it. I shared a story that I've been asking people around the place who are not academics in my life. What does it look like when you do a performance appraisal or a sit down or a one-on-one? Are you ever asked about your service or your contribution? And one person said, oh, well, look, somebody has to put up the Christmas tree, but that's about it. And I thought, unlike that, our lives are sort of loads of opportunities. So, you know, that there are, you know, in the conversation I was part of, service to industry and bringing industry and academic insights together, very important. Service to students, helping students at critical points in time where they need help, again, something hugely motivating. So I think those are really important. But another one that came up, which I think I wanted to raise anyway today, is what about recognition for service? So one of the conversations I have internally here is, how do we recognize service? How do we make service transparent? You know, unlike other things, I think in our context, it's one where I find there's a struggle with transparency. There's a number of aspects to it. One is giving opportunities for service. Maybe some are seen as more helpful to career development than others, and are people disproportionately getting access to those opportunities? That's one. The other thing is transparency across colleagues about who is doing what levels of service. I think most of us know maybe what our colleagues are teaching, but do we know the kind of service activities they are involved in, especially colleagues who we're not very close to or maybe don't talk to as often? And then the point that came from our discussion was, how do you recognize service, and is service recognized? Because probably long term that's very depleting if you're doing lots of service and you're not getting any recognition for it. And Peter and Maggie, if I missed anything, just jump in.
No, that covered everything we spoke about.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much. And then Maggie and Peter, you got the thumbs up there, and it's a good summary. So thanks very much. And room 3, who is in room 3? Do we anyone to feedback?
I'll speak there, Johnny. Yeah, so I was with Maria and Kate, we're both in year 3 of their PhD, so their insights were very interesting at this point. Particularly the learning to say no, I think, was something that they really resonated with them, particularly early on, saying yes to everything, and then really just purely in practical terms trying to actually figure out what to say no to. I think Felicity's theme around values came through very strongly. I think that really resonated with everyone, and even just to share a slight aside on some of these themes that Felicity raised, and I think the issue in the TUs at the moment where a lot of these documents are being written, so it's why it's so important. The influence in engaging with the community, where you can see what's happening in other universities, but even also on the theme around with your values of Felicity and being an advocate, we actually, a lot of the documents that we're writing in TU Dublin in the business school are quite influenced by the accrediting bodies that we're aiming for, and some of their language is changing. I hate to bring us back to that picture of McGregor, but some of it's changing with the context of the US. So we as a school, and then at the level of the individual, really having to make decisions around what do we value as a university and even to an individual level. So it's really relevant. Back to, I think, the early career view on it, I think the trajectory, the timing of things, and how you balance what you need for the jobs market. Obviously, what's going to go on your CV. And I think one of the things we talked about was, I think, having a plan for it, has really come through today, looking at how it aligns with your own research, your values, where you see your career going. I think one of the interesting things can be as well is we've all experienced it where sometimes these academic service roles get landed on you. To Anne's last point there about being transparent about it, but sometimes if you can try and see what service roles might be coming up that might work for you and actually potentially getting ahead of it and going to who is actually allocating these roles and saying, I might be open to doing that, can be manna from heaven from the person who's allocating these roles sometimes, rather than when it can be landed on you in September. So sometimes trying to get ahead of that. But also we're saying, I think a big thing is how you actually frame that academic service so you get the right recognition for it. And also things like a practical piece around it can be showing that through a lot of these service roles that you are a very positive colleague, that you're easy to work with, that you make a positive contribution. I think in terms of the jobs market, sometimes a decision late on in the interview process can come down to things like that. So framing the academic service that you've done in the right way for you. And I think there were some very practical points. I think Anne's advice around an Excel sheet to actually write down these roles. I have not done that enough, and have suffered the pain with recently. It's very, very practical to definitely do that. And also Felicity's point about saying it's a hidden contribution unless you are strategic about it. I think that's one of the big themes coming through today, to really to be that positive colleague, but to also see how this fits and frame it correctly for you. Right? And jump in, guys, if I didn't capture anything else.
Okay. Thanks very much, Donald. Yeah, some great great insights there and takeaways. So the final room was room 4, which I was involved in as well with Gabriella and Shirley. So Gabriella and Shirley, you can jump in here, but I think that I suppose we covered some of the things that have been mentioned already, but I suppose the two kind of key points I think that we took away was the importance of perhaps trying to align your research or your skills with academic service as well. So there might be particular aspects of your research that you're interested in researching in, that might be able to link up with academic service roles, and that you might be able to get some sort of synergies there between, for example, your research and your academic service. And the other one that we mentioned also was also the rewarding aspects of academic service, that there are parts of academic service that can be very rewarding. For example, engaging with students, for example, me to be being course director or just a module leader or whatever, but certainly, engaging with students, particularly if students have some problems or challenges or need some help, that sometimes that can just visit your office and you can spend an hour or half a day, not unplanned, but a lot of that work can have a real positive impact, for example, on, students or maybe colleagues as well. So I don't know, Gabriella and Shirley, is that kind of captures what we spoke about in room 4?
From my perspective, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, well done, Jonathan, from my perspective as well. Yeah, and we had some, I guess from my own, we've had some real examples with myself as a program director. We have, if you have a student who's bereaved, I had one that gone through, a marriage breakup this week, was going to quit her final dissertation. But I spent an hour of my time yesterday speaking to her. So she's now going to graduate with the rest of her class. But as I was saying to Gabrielle, I've now got better in my own role that you can't do everything yourself. We're able to get the full range of services in the university, tell them. So almost academic service and a program director, it's a little bit like a parent being a parenting. It's really hard work. It takes an awful lot of time, but you have other people to help you. But it's so rewarding when you see those students graduate and you get them there, even the ones who've gone through challenging times. So
that's great. Thanks, Shirley. Claire, do you want to kind of come up with any, having visited all of the rooms, you might have an overview of some of the things that you might have picked up on as well. So Claire, if you want to share some of your thoughts or key takeaways.
I think everything has come up, Johnny, there that everyone's shared it. It's just been really interesting to hear it. And then I'm quite pragmatic. So Gabriella, if you don't mind, I'm going to use your story. Johnny touched on it, but very specifically, it was a nice one. Gabriella's research is on women in leadership in multinational corporations. And automatically my head went to the DCU framework, where I was thinking, okay, Gabriella could get involved in like the section that we have that's very much about DEI, Athena Swan, developing female academics, and then that would tie nicely with her research. And then because DCU is very much about industry, University of Enterprise, again, because Gabriella is focused on multinational corporations, she could get involved in elements of service that are around connecting with industry. So her research and her service align, so she wouldn't need to spread herself too thinly. And Gabriella is already doing some of that. But I just thought it became a very convenient example for me to use to share here to show how, if you are very strategic, to Felicity's point, you can line your research and your service up together. Thanks, Gabriella, for giving me material to give an example to the room. But that's it from where I am.
Thanks, Claire. So what we might do is we have a couple of minutes for lots of questions and answers. So as people might have some questions, maybe based on the takeaways or even the previous presentations. So as you think of questions, we might let Felicity reply to maybe some of those kind of key takeaways and maybe give some feedback on those key takeaways. And again, if you want to type in questions into the chat, or we can put up your hand and we can deal with those when they come up. So Felicity, if you want to reply first of all to some of those key takeaways.
Yeah, I agree completely with what has been said. And, you know, the triggers that Anne created in her overview was really helpful for me because it put it in context. And, you know, like, look, I'm a qualitative researcher. I believe context matters. So for yourselves, it depends on what stage of your career, but I still do that. I still map it. And it was interesting for me, Danny was is involved in a number of things as an early career. She's just starting her doctoral study, and said, "Oh yeah, I might add in a few things." So what I'm really encouraging in terms of that strategy is each to its time. So I was course leader for 15 years in different courses, developed the courses and over that 15 years. So started with developing a degree course, but was then involved in a master's course and led the development of the DBA in SETU. And then I went, you know, when I was in the real world as a strategist, 5 to 7 years is a reasonable length of time to remain in a cycle because I only have so many skills in my wheelhouse. So I did go and negotiate with my team of managers and say, well, you can leave me in that spot, but actually what I have proven that I'm good at is development. So it's now in a space where those who have really, really talented individuals maybe haven't had that opportunity to step up into being a doctoral program leader or whatever. We treated it then as a business school strategy to ensure that there were opportunities given to various colleagues because we don't have a promotional strand in the IoTs at the time to continue to grow and evolve. So you can, when you're saying, I'll hand you this bit back and I'll do that bit instead, you can go in there negotiating. So instead of saying, I'll hand you this bit back, this is an opportunity for the school or faculty to further include people at various stages of their career. And here is where I see my capacity in academic service now and how I can best use the third of my time that is allocated to that aspect of the role that is academic. So that was one piece that I thought about as Danny spoke was this is the disadvantage and this is why we're seeing some colleagues get into the space where they're uncomfortably busy. And you know that old adage, busy fools. I think time for academia is really important so we're not knee-jerk so that we're research led and that we're informed in how we're approaching service. So that piece maybe is the piece that I came away from listening to the totality, is I'm really encouraging you to have a professional development plan for yourself. I'm really encouraging each of us, including myself, I do it myself, is setting out a strategic plan for me, not for the outward world, but for me, that's normally a 2-year plan. And seeing what I've been asked to do and seeing realistically what I could do, what pieces of that drain me and what pieces of that, you know, I have an old friend who used to say the world is full of radiators and drains. So those who are radiators, you leave a bit warmer, and those who are drains, you know who they are. And she said you need a 4-to-1 average. So when I look at my list of all 3 of those quartiles of Anne, I'm looking for my radiator and drain average. So I want to be around the people that give me warmth. And that is an aspect of how I choose which, because you will have to choose more than any other role I've had. An academic is responsible for their own career management, for the boundaries they place around their tasks and roles, and for their own resilience. Because it's in other jobs, I had a manager who said, that's enough now. Whereas this isn't that kind of sector. So that's kind of how I've tried to manage it. I came from project management, so it's how I try to manage the stuff around that. And I agree completely with what Claire was saying. So I've mentioned the Department of Rural and Community Development. I'm microenterprise research is my area. Capability development is what I do in that area, and I'm focused primarily in the rural context. Makes total sense, me trying to influence them. So that one I don't see in any way altruistic. I see it as I'm going to fight for the southeast corner of this country in terms of intellectual contribution that will improve the sustainable action of those organizations. So it's directly linked to research in context. So but that biggie is treat this as a strategy for you.
Thanks, Felicity. That's great. Yeah, and I think a key takeaway for me now is to decide whether I'm a radiator or a drain. I think that's a lovely that's a great way of putting it. Have we got any questions for Felicity? We have a little bit of time, a couple of minutes for a question. So yes, Anna Marie.
Hi, Felicity. Thank you so much for this session. It was really, really good and useful. And I think the values perspective especially helped for us to understand at the beginning of our career, especially as a PhD student, what can we look for in academic service and what will aid our own personal goals, but also our own career. But as someone who's in the beginning of their academic career, I guess my question is, when a request comes from someone who's above you, so there's always a power dynamic here. And I think from this seminar, it's easier for me to understand, okay, what should I focus on? But sometimes it's hard to say no when the person that makes like a request or something is your supervisor or someone that might be, I don't know, might be in a position of power over you. So I guess my question for you is if you have any practical advice on how to say no as an early career.
So in a case like that, where there's a power dynamic, which, you know, I'm not even master of my own destiny at this hour of my life. So in that case, Anna Marie, you're looking to your own strategy first to see whether it fits or not. You're looking to your current collective tasks that you are trying to achieve and what time it's taking in context. If it's a small task with a big benefit in a favour system, as you know exists in the Irish context, then I'd say to you, think about politically, don't be naive, think about politically, yeah, right, it's only a couple of hours or it's an hour or whatever. if it fits your strategic intent, or as if a piece of it fits your strategic intent, you have the potential of seeing what piece of it is appropriate to your own strategy and saying, yes, that's a large task. What I would suggest is, how about I take this piece? Okay. So you're now saying, you're not saying no, you're saying yes with a boundary. And that is something that, regardless of what stage of career, I personally would feel I'd have respect for you, Anne-Marie, because I would recognize that you now understand what's involved. And as a manager, I would consider that a very astute way of approaching it, because you're also saying to me, I've thought about this and I can see how much time is involved, and this is what I can allocate to be the best bang for your buck as my manager. And then if you really are in the space of absolutely not, well, then I'd go in with the negotiation. I'm not the appropriate person for this because. So you're actually going in with, because this is where my expertise lies, what I am the appropriate person for is X. So now you're circling back to what is the best use of that manager of you as well, Anna Maria, because realistically they're going, oh gosh, I didn't realize that was the exact research they're in. To go back to Anne's point earlier, not fully knowing what your colleagues are working on. And they're on, oh, that is good, because actually we're putting in such and such an application where your skills would really fit. And now you're starting to be remembered for what you do, as opposed to a kind of a generic resource. So that's how I'd approach it. And in honesty, that's how I approached it when I was at your stage. I did come from industry, and now several of the managers who knew me back then said, we all thought you were fierce cheeky, but then we realized, oh, hang on a sec now, we should be doing this ourselves. So there's a little piece of it, and that beautiful smile you've got to use when you're in negotiation. So you're not going in sternly, you're going in to negotiate. So practice it before you do it the first time and say, no, because, or no, but what I could be, or actually my workload is X, and that is a reach too many, that it would be detrimental to the tasks I'm already in.
That's great. Thanks very much, Felicity. Great question, Anna Marie, and some really good practical insights there from Felicity. Donald.
Thanks, John. Felicity, can I just ask you a quick question just to give your practical insights on this? That you mentioned it during the talk, the balance between the internal and the external, where people are potentially faced with an external opportunity and they know it could be hugely beneficial for them, their career, maybe in the academic community or wider, but they may not be seen or recognized internally, and vice versa. Something internal which could be very visible, what may take a huge amount of time, and they know potentially doesn't align with their research as much. How have you balanced those potentially conflicting opportunities?
Yeah, again, this is hindsight being perfect vision, Donald. But if I knew then what I know now, I would do two things. I'd consider whether I intend staying in that organization in the medium term, or whether I'm debating being in another organization. So that is an aspect of my decision in context. But I have unintentionally been, I have metaphorically stood at the door of my organization with my back to the door, looking out half of my time, and with my back to the outside world looking in half of my time. And I did that organically without realizing it. I think that to go back to Anne's point around transparency of service and visibility of service, internal service is less visible than external service. I really do. And I think external service is something that you can laud in a different way. If you're worried about it not being visible internally, you have to be politically astute. So if you do something in your external role, you should be putting it into your PR in your organization so it's up on your news feed on your website. And now your powers that be in your organization begin to realize this person has a lot in their wheelhouse and they're representing SETU or TU Dublin, Donal, they're representing TU Dublin in a tangible way that's giving the voice and brand of that totality of organization elsewhere. So if you don't hide if you win a best paper, or if you're on a committee, or if you do that outreach that you mentioned as one of them to second level or to the data schools, don't hide those under a bushel. Make sure that they're on the news feed and make sure that they're spread out into the regional newspapers. So that's a way of ensuring visibility of external contribution in the internal space. External is more powerful, at least as powerful, if not more powerful, on your CV. And you're asked for societal and economic contribution, and those aren't the internal things. If you're all internal, you've nothing to write in that paragraph. Yeah. And of course, everyone should think about contributions to the Irish Academy of Management, National Council, as our future leaders of the Academy.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Felicity, and thanks, Donal, for the question. Okay, so that's great. We're scheduled now to pass over to Claire, but again, I'm sure if anyone's got any more questions, we can try and take them or address them afterwards. So Claire, I'll hand back to you to wrap up the session. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, everyone. And Felicity, in particular, thank you very much. I have been scribbling frantically here, some notes for myself. So while this is an early career development network event, I'm after getting so much insight and so many tips from you, and clearly so have my colleagues, because I saw lots of heads nodding. Felicity, thank you again so much for your time today. So I'm just going to wrap up for the benefit of the Early Career Development Network. So those of you attending, if you can take a scan of this QR code, we'd love to get your feedback on today's session. And there's also a question in there on what else you might like the Early Career Development Network to do. We are a volunteer group, so we do our best, but we would love to hear your input, because at this point we have over the last number of years worked our way through our logo, which is FASTIR, F-A-S-T-E-R. In other words, we've covered funding, academic service, teaching, impact and research. So we're going around full circle now again, and we're hoping to come up with some new ways of delving into each of those areas. So we're definitely open to suggestions as to what you might like us to do. So have a quick scan of that QR code, because I have another one for you to do. And the next one, some of you are already involved. We have just recently set up the IAM Early Career Network LinkedIn group. So some of the feedback over a number of these sessions has been that the community who attend our events, our workshops, our virtual writers retreat feel that they would love to stay in touch beyond the event themselves. And so for that reason, we have this LinkedIn group that is purely for the attendees of the Early Career network events, early career academics and researchers like yourselves. So again, there's a QR code there so you can scan, and it will ping its way to the committee so that we can let you in, and you can then continue conversations with your peers. And we will also share resources and job opportunities as they come to us on that page. And last but not least, is just to remind you to look at the Irish Academy of Management webpage, the Early Career Development Network arm of it, and keep up to date with the events that are coming down the tracks. So our next event will be in October, and it will be another virtual PhD Writers Retreat hosted by the University of Limerick. Again, limited spaces on these writers' retreats. And again, yesterday I only read the feedback on the last one, and the feedback kept repeating, can we have more of these? So it's definitely something to attend if you can get there fast. The precise dates will be on the webpage shortly. After that, we will be hosting a workshop as part of the doctoral colloquium. Sorry, there's a typo in there, in Maynooth. So we will be hosting a workshop in the Irish Academy of Management conference in Maynooth in August. So again, if you are attending the doctoral colloquium, we will be there running a workshop, and we look forward to seeing you back there and in person. And following on from that, then there's our usual sequence of events. So again, another virtual writers retreat around February and March, another event or workshop around March, April, and again, another virtual writers retreat in October, November. And we have some ideas floating around in our heads as to what may also be coming down the tracks. But for now, that's the main lineup. It will be constantly updated on the webpage. So we hope to see you back at those events. So from me, Claire Gubbins, and from the Early Career Development Network Committee, composed of Jonathan Lavelle, Dawn O'Brien, Anne Keegan, James Duggan, and Maeve O'Sullivan, thank you very much for attending. And please do keep in touch, because we are working very hard to build this community of early career researchers and academics throughout the country, so that you have a network to work on. The Irish Academy of Management has been very good to me over the duration of my career. And I was laughing as Felicity spoke about radiators and drains, because the Irish Academy of Management and the Early Career Development Network Committee, Johnny, I'm putting you all in radiators. You're all my radiators. There's no drain. So again, thank you very much, everybody. And again, thank you, Felicity.
Thank you, Felicity. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everyone.
Let's see.